Hello, everybody. Welcome to a session, our webinar about the Urkund plagiarism checker. My name's Chris. I am the Educational Technology Specialist at ACC. And with me today is Carla Gibson, fantastic instructor. And I'm going to let Carla talk about her position at the college.
Awesome. So I'm Carla Gibson-Smith. So I work at ACC, Assiniboine Community College, and I work in the social service worker program there. And I was asked today to kind of talk to people a little bit about Urkund and how I use it in my classrooms and that sort of thing. So I'm going to do a screen share and I'm going to tell you more about what that looks like in my classroom. All right. So we've kind of switched now from the in-person to the blended model. So normally I would do sort of a presentation to the students about what Urkund is and all of that kind of thing. And what I really want to do actually is record something like we're doing right now and actually post it into my Moodle sites, but I hadn't had a chance to do that just yet. So I do introduce Urkund in our orientation sessions. And then I post this kind of a information block into all of their Moodle sites. So the way that I use Urkund is more so as a teaching and learning tool, as opposed to sort of a catch people doing something wrong kind of tool. And that's for it's a lot of reasons for that. I find that what I want the students to do is to do things well. So I found that giving them some additional tools to help them do things well is maybe better than some of the punitive positions. So in my courses, all of my written material, or almost all of my written material, there's probably a couple of assignments that don't have Urkund turned on it. But in all of my written material, I have my Urkund turned on. And there's a lot of settings that you can use for Urkund. So the way that I've chosen to use it is to allow the students to have access to both their numeric score and their report prior to actually fully submitting a document. So the students know that they can submit something into the Dropbox. So the way that Moodle works, you kind of like you submit it and then you confirm the submission. So in between those two steps, Urkund runs. So I tell my students to try to submit something early on, like not 5 minutes before the due date, but several days before the due date. Submit something and wait for your Urkund score. So they have an opportunity to sort of check their work. And what I say is quite often that, you know, once you sort of get using Urkund throughout the course of the term and that sort of thing, you might have a sort of a sense of what your papers normally come back as. So if you're a student who typically has a percentage score on Urkund of like 30 or 40%, and then one day you submit a paper ahead of time and it's at 70 or 80, that might actually be able to tell you that what's happened is when you were writing your paper that you missed a citation. Completely out of error, you meant to put it in, and it just happened that you missed that step. So for things like that Urkund can be a fantastic tool for them to help check their work. It can also be a really fantastic tool just in terms of noting how well they're doing their citations and paraphrases. So this is the document that I give them. So essentially what it says is, I just wanted to, first off, I think it's funny. So I talk about IKEA because it sounds like it's something like a bookshelf or something you would buy from IKEA. So my students know from this document that anytime they submit anything into the Moodle Dropboxes, they get to the opportunity to review that numeric score and the whole document. So I give them full access to the report. I remind them again to make sure that they are allowing Urkund to do its work, and also remind them that it would be really helpful if they submitted it with enough time to review it and to revise their paper. I don't make any promises about Urkund's abilities to check plagiarism. Chris and I can tell you a couple stories about, there's actually been times when students have submitted something to the Dropbox that I knew was plagiarized, but Urkund didn't pick up. So this is not a panacea. It's not going to pick up absolutely everything. But I do explain to the students what Urkund does is checks for matching text. So it checks their assignment against third-party information, like journals or the web, and provides a percentage score. I also make very clear that they are expected to use third-party information in their assignments, so they should have a score of something more than 0. There are times when their score would be 0. Like, for example, I do topic circles and things like that, that the students are just kind of doing, really brief talking points, and it's their own opinions. So like those kinds of things are going to come really low. And research papers are probably going to come a lot higher. So it doesn't matter. Like I don't give them a threshold. I don't say like, if it's over 60, you should be worried. Like there's no threshold or anything like that. So I give them the sort of how it works. The numeric score is available before you finalize your submission. So the system might catch it. I don't tell them for sure that it will, but that it might catch it before you hand it in. And that way they can easily make revisions. You submit the paper to Urkund, and then Urkund returns a score of 98. That gives a good opportunity to go back. So I also tell them that they might hear other people talk about Urkund as a plagiarism checker. And for me, that's really only part of the point. So for me, and I tell the students, it's more about ensuring that you have one more tool in your academic toolbox. I said, although plagiarism does happen, and when it does, it often requires a lot of manual text matching. And I have spent countless hours, searching for little strings of phrases that I know that weren't the students, and run them through Google. And it takes, to do a paper, like 4 or 5 hours to do that. It's an incredible amount of work. So I tell them that this saves me from doing some of that work, right? And I tell them that most of the time it's accidental, right? Most of the time you meant to put in the citation, you forgot. Maybe it was an error that you didn't completely understand how to do the citations, that sort of thing. But I do tell them that, about 10% of the time that it is plagiarism, and we'll deal with that accordingly. Okay. I also tell them that it runs diagnostics for collusion, which means that it'll check the paper against those of their classmates, which has actually been probably the one that's been most interesting. I've had probably 3 times the same 2 students submitting papers that indicated collusion. So that was a really interesting conversation to have. So I do tell them that it does check it against their colleagues. And again, that's a setting in Urkund as well. So Urkund, I have mine set to check it when the students submit, and then also to check again after the due date, which means it can then be checked against all of the students' work. So I give them the link also so that they can actually go to Urkund on the web. And kind of learn more about it there if they have other questions. That I'll try to answer any questions that they have about it. And of course, back to Chris, they're our Urkund guru. So if I don't know, I've called Chris in more than once. So this is how I introduce it to students. I'll either, like this currently is posted into all of their Moodle sites. I've sent it as email. Clearly, I have a conversation in the classroom about Urkund as part of my overall sort of academic integrity conversation. And I don't know about unit, but I mean, like, just, sort of highlighting academic integrity in general to the students. So this is just one piece of how I do it. And Chris has been super helpful in getting that done with me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carla. So you were saying, I'm curious what happened the first time you tried it out. Do you have it, like, what are your interesting stories or ways that you found it helpful, or ways that your students have found it helpful?
It's actually really interesting because even though the students know that it's there, some of them use it a lot and some of them just kind of ignore it. But a couple of the really good stories I've had about using Urkund is when we first got it, and I'd run over it with all of the students, and they were quite concerned. They were like, they didn't quite understand, but we kind of got through that much. And then I think about 2 assignments later, I got a score back from a student on an assignment that really shouldn't have had a lot of sort of third-party information on it. I got a score back on a student at about 85 or 90%, I think.
That seems a little high.
It was a little high, and not that, like, I've certainly had papers that are like at 70 and they're totally fine, like if the student has used the citations and all of that, but it was a little high for this particular assignment. And the student tends to be like a middling to higher sort of student in ability wise. So I was really intrigued, and I was like, well, that's quite interesting. And I looked at her document and I went, oh yeah, like she's just kind of pasted that out of the text or whatever. So I called her down, and this was before I released the reports to the students. So this is sort of part of my learning process as well. So called the student down to the office and said, so we're using this thing called Urkund. You remember us talking about it, all of that. And I said, I just wanted to show you what your document looked like on Urkund. She hadn't looked at it. So I said, well, I'm just going to call it up on the screen, and you sort of, you let me know what you think about that. And as soon as I called it up on the screen, and it had like, the document and like all these like orangey red bars showing all the stuff that was taken from someplace else, she looked at it, she's like, that is so plagiarized. I am so sorry. Like, and it was this moment of realization, and there was no fear that she was going to be like, that this was going to be a big thing or anything. Like, it was just like, oh my God, I didn't realize I'd done that. I've been working extra shifts. I didn't spend as much time on it as I normally do. I will totally fix this for next time, sort of thing. It was awesome. It was like the best thing. So that was really good.
And I bet that got around to the other students in the class as well.
I would say so.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
As a heads up. So yeah, that can always help too. Awesome.
Yeah. I think the other way that it helps too is that I had another student who had submitted things that I had given warnings about, like, you really need to check how you're citing this. You really need to, like, I would encourage you to go to the learning curve. I would, like, here's all of the ways, here's all the feedback about what you need to do differently, because what you're doing is incorrect. And I mean, in terms of incorrect formatting, or in terms of incorrect like academic misconduct stuff, right?
Right.
So I'd given the student quite a number of chances, quite a number of opportunities to kind of sort that out, had talked with the student. And just at the very end of the term, one particular term, he handed in his final assignment. And it was very clearly, there was no mistaking it. I can't remember what his score was, but it was very, very clearly plagiarized.
Was it in the black?
It was black, yeah.
Yeah, like, and for those of you who haven't seen an Urkund with similarity score, like when it's a low number, it'll be green, and then it transitions to the amber, to the red, and black is like, I think it's 85% or higher.
Yeah.
That's like, there's a lot of issues there. So
right, so there was a lot of issues there. So the really cool thing about that was that I was able to refer back to like the other feedback that I had given him about how to do things better. And where to go for supports and all that. So I could refer back to all of those pieces and say, you can look at your report, and based on your report, this is what I've seen. And I didn't have to do any extra, like, it didn't take me 4 hours to search the web and find all of those pieces. They were already there, and there was no, like, he saw that before, or he had the opportunity to see that before he fully handed it in. So there was no, I think sometimes people are worried that students are going to be like, get upset and that kind of thing. And this really helps with that.
Was he upset when you met with him? Did he cry? Did he apologize? Like, what happened? Was it a difficult conversation?
It was a kind of a non-starter. He was just kind of like, well, yeah, that happened and that course is done and I'm good. So
okay.
That.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it worked out that way. But you and I have had a couple conversations about, like, I know that there was one student who I knew the text that she had taken was lifted from someplace, because I'd actually used the material that she was referring to. I'd actually used it in my work. I'm like, and it's not referenced, and it wasn't coming up on Urkund, and you and I ended up having to upload extra documents.
Yeah, like anything that's behind a paywall, like, how you can go into some repositories, Sage or whatever, and you have to pay for a license to get to those articles. Mm-hmm. So if a student has gotten an article that is behind a paywall, that, like, Urkund won't check that automatically. Yeah. So if so what in that instance, we had to take that article and we could and upload it to the Urkund database ourselves. And then in going forward, all other student submissions would now start to be compared to that article. Yeah. Yeah,
So it's
like you said, it's not there. There is no panacea. Like there is nothing that is going to catch everything 100% of the time. Um,
right,
we can only do our best to stay ahead of them a
right.
little bit.
Well, and that's what I think. Like, I mean, it's part of my overall sort of conversation with students about academic integrity.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
falls like it goes in line with assessment design and all of those pieces as well. And I really
Yeah,
do tell the students like this isn't it's not perfect and it's not gonna like catch you. There's still extra pieces to that, but it really is nice to have another tool for the students to see. And in the circumstances where something may be plagiarized, that there's perhaps fewer steps for us as well.
for sure. And depending on the student's lens as well, right? If a student is if this is their last paper on a course that they need the credit for in order to get a certification, but they're not planning on doing any more academic research or citations of articles, they may be less inclined to follow the hard and fast rules versus somebody who may be going on to university and
Mhm.
planning, to actually use that skill in the future. They may
Yeah,
have developed that more fully, for sure. So, I mean, the students are always going to be, there are
yeah.
partners in this, for sure.
Well, and they can. It's an informed decision.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, and there comes a point where the student becomes responsible for their work, right? After being given all the tools that they have, yeah, they have to assume some of the responsibility themselves, right?
For sure.
Awesome.
So
Well,
that's how I do it.
that's great. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm going to go on and show everybody what it looks like in Moodle now, and just show them what it looks like as a similarity score when you're marking an assignment activity, and as well as we'll take a quick look at a report that has just been fictitiously generated. I created these things myself by cutting and pasting a bunch of words at random together. In some cases, in other cases, I did steal it from the internet. So we'll see what happens when the similarity scores come back. But I guess if anybody wants to use it, of course you can always contact CLI. But would you be okay if somebody contacted you
Yeah, for
if
sure.
they had some experiences and wanted some mentorship on it?
For sure. No
Awesome.
problem.
That's great. Okay. Thank you very much, Carla.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let's take a look at what an Urkund similarity score looks like, and then we'll also take a look at the actual Urkund report. And then they would view all submissions. And I'm just going to scroll down to hit the first few students, and then I'm going to scroll over, and you'll see there's a range of scores. We have one score. The Urkund similarity score is 0%, so there's no matching content in this document. We have one where about 52%, half of the content is matching. And then look at this, we have one that's actually a 99% match, and that's because I just copied and pasted it from the internet. In order to actually see the report, what you would do is you would click the word Urkund in the percent and the colored box. This is actually a link to the report, so I'm going to click on it. And then the Urkund report will load up, and this is the dashboard that you'll see. This particular student's document came back with a similarity score of 52%. The next thing that you can do is you can actually click on the link over here to see the matching text. So when I click on here, Urkund will show me the findings. I can look at the sources, like where it has found the matches to the student submitted text, or I can look at it in the form of a whole document. So these tabs, we'll start at the finding tab. So here, this is what was in the submitted document. This is what the Urkund found on the internet, and that actually found it in another student submission. So for this particular case, it looks like some other student submitted a document that contained this exact text. And then we go to the next highlight. You can go through each of the highlights on the text. You can navigate through the text by clicking on the arrows at the bottom, or if you want to see the entire document, you can click on the tab at the top. And now this is anything in orange has been detected on the net somewhere else. And then if you click on these boxes, it will show you what the matching text was. And so there was some matching text, some of it wasn't, some of it was matching text. It's highlighting this gray area because there's a quotation here and a quotation here, but there's no actual citation. So that it'll identify any citations, quotes that are missing citations as well. And then this part it did find, this it didn't find. And so you can go through this, the entire submission, and you can see, well, some of it was plagiarized, some of it hasn't been cited properly. You know, this student would be in need of some support for sure. So now when you're looking at the sources, let's suppose you assigned 4 articles to read and they're not publicly available. You can actually upload them and add them to the database, and then Urkund can check the student submissions against the articles that were the assigned readings as well. So just so you know, that's where you could do that as well. So now I want to show you how you would take advantage of Urkund if you did want to try it out. So in this demo, I'm going to set up an assignment activity and show you the configuration settings for it. So to do that, we will turn on editing, add an activity or resource, select the assignment activity, name it. This will be the assignment setup demo with Urkund. I'm not going to change anything else about this assignment. All that, when you're setting up the assignment, the only, in terms of Urkund, this is, you would go to the Urkund plagiarism plugin section and expand it. And by default, it's not enabled. Enable Urkund is set to no. So I'm going to change that to yes. And I am also going to show more so we can see all of the settings. So let's go over these one by one. So show the similarity score to student by default is never. If you want to give your students the opportunity to see their similarity scores, you would put that to always. You can have the choice after the due date, after the cutoff date. So I'm going to switch that to always because I want students to be self-selecting the help that they get. If they're submitting something with one of those high similarity scores, I'd rather them realize that and go and fix the problem and then submit it for me to market, as opposed to me having to monitor that. Show the similarity report. So the similarity score is that colored box from 0 to 100%. The actual similarity report is that document with the white and the orange highlighted text. So you can also let the student see that. When should the file be submitted? So that means when will it be submitted to Urkund for processing? So submit the file when they send it for marking, so when they submit it, or do it when they first upload it. So I'm going to do it. I want the students to be checking this themselves, so I'm going to set it up for when it's first uploaded. Resubmit on close, yes, because I want Urkund to check it first when it's uploaded, but then I also want it to check it against all the other student submissions. So I'm going to set that. I'm going to have the documents resubmitted upon close. Submit attached files and inline text. Yeah, I want everything submitted. The receiver address, this is the email address that documents get sent to in order to be processed by Urkund. So don't mess around with that or it will break. Send a student email, that's up to you. If you want them to get an email, you can. And allow supported file types. So this allows the teacher to restrict which file types will be sent to Urkund for processing. It does not prevent students from uploading different file types. So within, and I mean, this is a bit of a complication. So within this type of activity in the submission settings, in the submission types, you can actually restrict the file types here. You could say, I only want document files, and even then I only want Word document files. So you could restrict that. So if you are using that, when you come down here, allow supported file types. So if you put no, then again, it's the same thing. You could say, I only want document file types. And so now the students can only submit document. But anyways, look, we've digressed. So Urkund is set up. And in this case, in this example, all students can only submit Microsoft Office.doc or docx file types. And then you save and return. And just like that, bippity boppity boo, we have our assignment set up, demo with Urkund. And now when students submit to this, the files will be processed both when they upload it and when they actually submit it at the very end. When it's after the due date, it'll be processed again by Urkund. Thanks for watching.